I've heard Swami Kriyananda comment on various times about the enormous discrepancy between our normal waking consciousness and actually being in superconsciousness, really perceiving reality as it is. We read the scriptures. I've been studying these teachings for decades of my life now. And I have very big ideas that I can speak of and understand just the tiniest bit. But I was talking to a friend of mine who is very much of a Vedantist, and a Vedantist is one who is constantly affirming the illusion of this world and that we're all really just one with Spirit. And I had to honestly admit that I don't think about that very much. And he was shocked. How can you not think about it? He said, I think about it all the time. And I sort of had to back up really far. I feel like the whole process of my spiritual life over years is a desperate effort to diminish confusion. Swami himself once, when I forced him to compliment me, when he was complimenting everyone else and I was there and he seemed to have missed me, so I asserted myself like that. So he looked at me so sweetly and he said, well, Asha, you're far less confused than you used to be. Which actually was true. And sometimes I think I'm less confused and sometimes I think I'm more confused. Recently, I'll just bring pieces and bits and pieces in here. At a certain point, Swamiji, because Swamiji has to spend so much of his life explaining the teachings, and he would write and he would speak, whenever he would get some image, some metaphor that would give people insight into that which could not be expressed, he would get so elated, and he would often repeat it and repeat it. And he came up with this marvelous one some 20 years ago about time, and it had to do with this barren planet, which was the only planet in all of creation, and just sits there, and if there's no point of contrast, how can there be any time? And then there's one moon that rises. I've listened to that. I've listened to that yesterday. It just came on one of the Treasures talks. I listened to it again. And for just a split second, I suppose that's right for time, isn't it? Just a split second, I understood it, and then immediately it evaporated. Just evaporated. Because you can talk to me all you want about how there's no such thing as time, but it was earlier this morning and now it's now, isn't it? And at the same time that I can't grasp it in any reasonable manner, the reality of it informs everything that I do. In this respect, I've shared with you all, and I was thinking of it again. There was a man who did a lot of work with terminally ill people. And one of the things he did was have them make two lists. And one was the list of those things that they were so disappointed they wouldn't get to be part of. And the other was those things they were so relieved that they wouldn't have to face. And it was actually the things that they were so relieved that they didn't have to face that actually became the fulcrum of what they were working with. And from time to time in my life, I've tried to just do that exercise just for fun, just to sort of do a little inventory of where I'm at. But I realized the deep reality of reincarnation, which I first accepted as a theory decades ago, but now is so integral to the way I think about everything, absolutely precludes the possibility of putting anything on the list that you're not going to have to face. Because the minor factor that you might not have to face it in this body is so small compared to the fact that you simply will have to face it. That sooner or later it will happen, and oddly enough, everything that I'm not enjoying now guess what that is? That is what I refused to face before. And it feels rather in the present, doesn't it? It doesn't feel in the past, it doesn't feel in the future. And they started realizing, well, that's the illusion of time. And even though I don't get the dead planet and the single moon and all of that, my mind can't go there. My mind finds a place where I live with it, which is there's no escape. And therefore the future isn't different than the present. And the past doesn't go away. So how else are you going to say there's no such thing as time? I mean, what's more relevant than that simple thought? If there was such a thing as time, there would be an escape hatch here somewhere. But there is none. I was also thinking today, just because these first few readings at the beginning of the year, and I've come around on this cycle a lot of times, and I'm always going to get some of them. I don't know which ones I'll get. But this is a particularly good one. Did God manifest or make creation? It feels exceedingly abstract, but it isn't. But I'm trying to hear that. I am the fluidity of water. I am the sound of Om permeating. I am the life. I am all of these different things. And I don't know how to go out there. And then another weird one. This is like a collection of weird thoughts. You're driving down the street here, and I'm driving down the street, and I'm watching all these cars, and just because I'm driving, I'm trying to remember that I'm driving, and so I'm paying attention like this. And suddenly I think, how many other planets are there? And what state are those planets in? There's a section in Conversations with Yogananda, a class we've been doing on Tuesday nights, which is Conversations with Yogananda is, when Swami wrote that, it was everything else that hadn't been included in anything else he wrote. He literally just numbered them, and everything else is in there. So you go through incredibly fascinating, weird little sequences. This whole little sequence about UFOs and other planets and what we incarnate in. And Master's just very casually, well, of course there's life on other planets. Of course there's whole civilizations and universes going on. And if we have a dual, and that's if Earth has if our sun has a dual, if our solar system has a dual, and it's in higher ages and we're in lower ages, I mean, who knows? There's planets that are entirely tamasic. There's planets that are entirely sattvic. And if you're on one, it's as real to you as this one, isn't it? And so I'm driving down El Camino thinking about the traffic, looking at the buildings, and all of a sudden, well, I had a few friends who had mental difficulties. One of those friends is me, but, just like a little trouble coping with this world. And one of them, when their holiday from ordinary reality came, I said something to Swamiji. I said, it feels to me like they're standing right on the cusp of seeing what is really required for spiritual freedom. And it's just like, I think I'll take a holiday. And Swami said, oh yes, madness is a necessary stage on the path to self-realization. Just so casually. Because you do get to the edge and you realize time is an illusion. Everything has to be faced. There's absolutely no way around it. Nobody is ever going to apologize to you, ever. Nobody's ever going to make it right for you. And that's it. And I think I don't think about those things a lot because it shakes my balance. It's much easier to just get up in the morning and try to be nice. That's a good start. Let's just try to be nice. But at the same time, I have to say, I have to realize that what gives me the power to hold on in a day-to-day basis is actually that giant picture. Because if all of that weren't true, then there would be a way out here. And it's the constant just sort of slamming up against it. Just a few of them, that it's always going to be now, and there's never going to be a time when it won't be happening. I don't even know how to begin to think about that. Swami says something just remarkable when he was talking about divine realization. He says, he put it, he said it just like this. He said, there's a moment when God realization comes, he says, and you realize that there is only one consciousness in all of creation. And he said, just for a moment you feel just unbearably lonely. What a way to phrase it. Because it's just complete, there's only one. He said, and then immediately bliss comes. But wow, you feel lonely. Now all of us, we all go up to the edge of lonely, and all of these challenges to our equilibrium. It's always the question of how do we solve it. I was here with Navashan on Friday, and it's all the cloths are down because it's the end of our holiday season, and they're hung from the highest part of the ceiling here. So it requires this very, very tall ladder, and a person has to go up that tall ladder. That person is not me. I have an intermittent fear of heights. Every once in a while I'm not afraid at all, but most of the time I'm very much afraid of heights. So much afraid of heights that I'm afraid of Navashan being up high. So I'm supposed to be there helping him, and I couldn't watch him. I mean, he's perfectly comfortable just scrambling up the ladder, and it's safe, and people do it all the time. I had to turn my back. I turned my back and just tried to have a pleasant conversation with him. But what was so amazing to me is the experience of fear. Just this vibration of fear that was in me that I had to work just really, really hard to push it away. When I was with Gary on the ladder and I was having a freak out, Gary just from the ladder said, "I've never been nervous on a ladder and I'm becoming nervous, Asha." I thought, oh wow, this is really so not helpful. But it was just like, the causelessness of it is what made it such a textbook illustration. Sometimes you have a feeling, because I'm talking about fear of heights, this is totally entertaining, but I'll tell you, in Florence, there's a Duomo, and you can climb up all these stairs and then go around this catwalk very, very high and then go up onto the roof. Well, every so often I forget. So I climbed up all those stairs and I started out on the catwalk, and I got about, I don't know, I can feel it. I got just a little distance there. I looked over the edge, and that one I think was a flashback. I was either thrown or fell off of that thing. I absolutely panicked, really panicked, and I went backwards and through everybody and down the stairs and out into the, that's amazing. A few years later I went back, and Nancy Kendall Santoshi was with us that time, and she's very sturdy. And I got a hold of her skirt like that, and I went all the way up to the top. There's a picture of me somewhere just sitting at the top, just with my eyes like this. I made it like that. But I did it for a real simple reason, because fear is everything. So I'm standing there with Navashan just feeling all this fear go through me. And I had to play out, forgive me, Navashan, I had to play out all the way through. So he crashes, so he falls, so his life has changed. We all just find a way, we go on. I mean, that's one way to do it. One way to do it is and Swami suggests this sometimes, take it as far as the fear is going to take you. And then what happens then? And you'll still be there. Consciousness never stops. You'll either be dead or you won't. There's this story of that disciple of, was it Shankara, I think? Woman said, she was so nervous all the time. She was always, after him. What if this happens? What if that? Finally she said, well, what if I die? Her guru, he turned to her and said, die then. And she fell over dead. Just like that. It's like, enough already. Okay, you're afraid of this, now die. So she died. This is a true story. I mean, this is an ancient story, but she died. Now, I always think of the rest of it. She dies, but you don't go anywhere when you die. You just leave your body. And her guru had the complete consciousness to be with her on the other side. So I'm sure he looked at her and said, so, now what? So now you're dead. So what do we do now? I mean, a hard lesson. I love to think that maybe she started laughing. Why not? Okay, so the worst has happened. Because there is no worst. Because what we're always working with exactly the same thing. And this is our reading, insofar as I'm going to talk about it today. We are manifested of the Spirit. Nothing about us exists. Swami was saying on that same talk about time, he was just talking about the fact that this personality, which is how we recognize each other and how we recognize ourselves. I am, sparkly in this way and dull in this way and smart in this way and talented here. All of it, he said, has really nothing to do with us. We are just the ocean itself, just rising up in a wave that looks like that. But the ocean never actually becomes that wave. And the wave is never less than the whole ocean. We just get so confused. That's why I think sometimes, Swamiji, I think I'm a little less confused now even than I was then. It was very high praise. You're less confused than you used to be. Because we're all so confused. We're just always like this. And there's this, the teachings are fantastically clear when we get them down to the really clear parts. And for me, I pick the parts that work for me. One part that works really terrific for me is this Vaishya to Kshatriya. This is the 4 castes, which are, a social entity in India now, but that's not their truth. Their truth is they describe how we progress in consciousness from delusion to freedom. And most of us vibrate right here between Vaishya and Kshatriya. And here's what it means. Because those states of consciousness are defined by what we think causes us suffering and what we think alleviates suffering. And the Vaishya consciousness thinks that suffering is caused by the things that happen to us. And the way to alleviate suffering is to control what happens to us. And isn't that what we do? I'm there, Navashan's on the ladder. Please get down off the ladder, Navashan. I'm frightened. My father was raised by a Jewish mother. He said, which is funny on television and not so funny in life, is how he put it. And the epitome of it was, I'm cold, you put on a sweater. So I'm afraid to climb a ladder, so I don't want Navashan to do it. And I make Gary nervous when he's climbing it. Because I feel uncomfortable, it needs to change. And of course, there's no actual it out there. So our, upset is just vibrations happen in a certain way, and they start vibrations within us, and then fear, however we call it, it's always fear. We always anticipate that something's going to happen, that it's going to be more than I can handle, and I need to stop it. You're an unpleasant person, you need to change. You're a bad president of the United States, you need to be defeated. These homeless people, I can't stand to see them on the street. Somebody has to do something. I saw this little child, he was so perfect. This little child in the airport, we were on some long international cycle of something, and this poor child had been, who knows how long he'd been traveling. And his parents looked as haggard as he did, although they just had more capacity to keep it together. The kid had just completely lost it. And he was just kind of thrashing around in his little stroller. He was too tired to thrash with much fury, but he was still thrashing, and he was down to a whimper. And there was no language, but it was so clear. Somebody do something. I feel so miserable. Somebody do something. And I just thought about it, and I looked at him, and I thought, honey, I wish we could. I wish they could do it for me. Sometimes in my life, I just find myself inside my own consciousness thinking, somebody do something. But nobody can. Because this is the shift between Vaishya to Kshatriya, then Kshatriya to Brahmin. And what happens when you become a Kshatriya, which is it's manifested by the soldier. I mean, the epitome of the soldier is that external circumstances do not affect him. He has a job to do, and he has the courage, determination, and the training to do it, even at the cost of his life. I mean, that's the perfect picture, isn't it? But what it means spiritually is, I understand that the battle is within me. And some battles are transparent. Navashan is perfectly confident on the ladder, did all the work without any problem. I'm standing there freaking out all by myself. And that's how God looks at us all the time. Everything, He's got it under perfect control. This whole universe is going just as it's supposed to go. The object, however, is different than we think it is. We think the object is for somebody to do something, apologize to us, make it right, and always be nice. Especially now that I'm in the ashram, you should all be nice. All of you, especially to me. You know? I don't really care what your reality is. What about me? How do I fit into this? I remember someone came to me once and complained about someone else's behavior. I don't know what they wanted me to do. So-and-so's behaving badly. I said, let's take them out. I have an idea. On Saturday morning, let's take the person out to the middle of the yard and let's shoot him. You know, if we just got rid of the person, then we would have no problem, would we? And you know, of course, they looked a little horrified, but that was really what they were suggesting. My world is made uncomfortable by the presence of this, let's get rid of this. That's what the Vaishya says. And we hang out there as Vaishyas for a really long time. We get rich, we get powerful, we get influential, we get controlling, we get whatever it is that we think we need to hold them all in place. And then, of course, there's an earthquake, or a war, or God knows what. And we just crash on that rock over and over again until finally it occurs to us that we're fighting the wrong battle in the wrong way. That the real battle is to know who we are, to understand whether I'm even vulnerable. The Guru says, oh, I'm so afraid I might die. Die. Okay, I'm so afraid that I'll be left alone. I'll get old. No one will like me. They'll see who I really am. They'll continue to not be nice to me. God knows. You know, we've set a lot of stuff in motion. All those bills have to be paid now. Everything we hoped to avoid before, that we died, that we managed to die so that we didn't have to face it. It didn't go anywhere. It just hung out until now. And now we have to face it. So now are we going to keep trying to control it? Are we going to recognize that I'm not these waves. I'm just the ocean. And the more profoundly and deeply I understand that my only hope is to get back to the ocean, to remember the ocean, to live in the ocean, to behave as if, I understood that we are all just this one great force. This is the great battle that's going on in our world right now. It's not about ISIS and Christianity or the Democrats or the Republicans. It's not about any of those things. It's whether or not we are one interrelated consciousness, and whether what my actions hurt you. And that the only solution here, the only solution, really, is that we all come back to our source. And I heard Master's voice the other night say so simply, Kriya Yoga will help create the brotherhood of man by bringing each one of us back to an understanding of our relationship with God. And when we understand our own relationship with God, which the news is so good, if we can just keep it in our minds, we weren't even created by God, we were manifested by God. Which is to say we were never separate. There's no, as Swamiji said, He's not mad at us. There's no way He could ever be mad at us. He set the whole thing up. It's just the ocean wave rises up. And we're sort of up there at the top of the wave, and we think something else is happening. We're just driving around on this planet thinking we're the only planet. I don't know why that strikes me so much. I just have this weird vision of other people on other planets driving their little cars. But what it does is it depersonalizes it to such an enormous extent. And that's terrifying. It's just very quietly terrifying also, just to be floating out. And I remember my mental health holidays when I just said, I don't think so. I think I'll just live in a fantasy world for a few incarnations here. But after it's all done, after all those incarnations in the asylum and all that stuff is done, I just came right back to where I was standing. And says, how are you going to deal with this fear? The only way you're going to deal with this fear is as a kshatriya, which is to do battle. And the only enemy is the idea that we're vulnerable at all. Whether that vulnerable is physical, financial, emotional, we feel vulnerable. Believe me, I know that. I'm not trying to say, oh, come on now, just snap out of it. It's just like, it's called, in the early days of Ananda, we used to do that to each other a lot more. You know, somebody's really emotionally fractured about something, and you say, well, it's all a dream. It's called true but irrelevant. It's not like we can just snap out of it. That's the peculiar thing he's done to us. But we can live on multiple levels. And that's the best we can hope for. We can live on multiple levels. It is a dream. It's a dream in the sense that we were never really separated from our true home. We've never displeased God. We're never not loved. We never fail. You know, nothing ever really goes wrong. It's just the waves rise and the waves fall, and we lose contact with the ocean. This is where the simple advice, do kriya, becomes the answer to everything. But what's being said by that is go back into your true self. Stand at the truth of who you really are. And then from there you just peer out, like looking out the window. You just peer out into that world out there. And always find your rest. Swamiji said the beautiful phrase once, just rest in the heart, is what he said. Just rest in the heart. Rest in the heart of who we really are. And come out as we need to. And when it gets too agitated out there, as it does, just solve it by coming back into the heart. Coming back into Master's presence, into Divine Mother's love. That's the only way we'll ever be free.